As you can tell from the discussion so far this morning, a very, very critical issue, and there's a few things that we've been doing at MassDEP to help the towns address this issue. One of the things we've done is we've actually established a Cape and Islands wastewater section. Focus on the issues on the Cape and Island. We have another wastewater section that deals with off Cape, but we've got a section that deals with just on Cape issues, and it's a section of 6 staff, and actually I think 2 or 3 of them are here today. We've got Maggie and Sam and Ian. Is Ian here? And we actually have a new intern whose first day is today. Hopefully she comes back, and that's Gabby sitting over there with our other staff members. So what's the problem? I don't think I really have to go into this. I think Jason did a really good job of outlining what the issues are with the wastewater on the Cape. And I think just looking at the agenda today, we all know why we're here today. It's to listen to what we can do about this. So what has the state done to help out with this issue? So on July 7th, last year, 2023, almost a year ago now, we established new regulations. We changed the Title V regulations and started with wastewater regulations. And through those changes, we established designated natural resource nitrogen-sensitive areas upon the promulgation of those regulations. And this was based on a couple of things. Based on a EPA-approved TMDL, which is a maximum amount of pollutant that can enter a water body, and you can still maintain water quality standards. And it also helps to determine how much nitrogen we have to remove from the environment to fix that problem. And it's also based on the 208 plan that Andrew talked a little bit about earlier. So the first changes were the changes to Title V, and in those regulations, in these nitrogen-sensitive areas, residents were going to be required to upgrade their septic systems to best available nitrogen-reducing technology, or BANRT. New construction would require to have that done starting this July. We changed it. I think it was the original date was January, but we bumped it off a little bit. And then existing systems would have to upgrade within 5 years. Okay, so the residents would have to put in new septic systems. Unless, and this is where the watershed regulations come in. Oops, I went too far. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Unless the community operates under a watershed permit. So they could apply for a watershed permit, or if they weren't prepared to apply for a watershed permit at this time, they could submit a notice of intent that they are going to apply for a watershed permit, outlining a schedule of when they're going to do that and whatnot. Or the town files a de minimis nitrogen load exemption. So as we talked this morning, a couple other people talked, watersheds don't pay attention to municipal boundaries, so they often extend into another town. If the watershed in another town is relatively small, and it's contributing less than 3% of the nitrogen, the town could apply for a de minimis exemption and not have to deal with the septic systems in that area, and it's a 3% load. So by either applying for a watershed permit or submitting a notice of intent that you're going to apply for a watershed permit, or filing the de minimis nitrogen exemption, it puts a hold on upgrading the septic systems in those watersheds. So what is the watershed permit? It's a 20-year permit because we know this is going to take a long time to solve, instead of the traditional 5-year permit that we issue for groundwater discharge permits. Issued to a local government unit, regional government unit, or multiple government units. Provide communities the opportunity to apply a greater range of solutions to address their water quality needs, such as increased sewering, which is fairly standard, or alternative innovative approaches. A lot of folks are looking at permeable reactive barriers where the groundwater migrates through the barrier and the nitrogen is broken down. And so there's all kinds of things that you can look at beyond just sewering, agriculture, a bunch of different things, and you include that in your watershed permit. Okay. The watershed permit is based on an approved watershed management plan, and the watershed management plan consists of the current nitrogen load, projected loads, and necessary reductions, what you're planning to do for conventional and alternative technologies to address the situation, and a plan B. If you start doing this work and your monitoring demonstrates that maybe it's not working the way you were planning, you could back up and you'd have to implement a plan B. Cost estimates for the proposed actions, a watershed monitoring plan so that we can determine whether or not what you're doing is working. And it's implemented on a 5-year schedule, so we don't wait till the end of the 20 years to say, okay, it's not working, we have to start over again. You look at it every 5 years and see if you need to change horses in midstream at that point. The watershed permit implementation, it's a lot of work involved in doing this, okay? And what we've been trying to do with that new section that we put together is provide technical assistance meetings to guide watershed management plan development and implementation. One of the things we've been really wrestling with recently is most of these watershed plans are looking at increased sewage, which makes sense because you can really decrease the nitrogen concentrations. But with increased sewering, there's that increased water that you need to do something with. And it's a lot of water, millions of gallons a day. So what do we do with that? And we've been meeting with several towns, some towns every 2 weeks, to go over this issue of where we're going to discharge this groundwater, the treated effluent, rather. And in a lot of these cases, there's so much water, we're looking at multiple locations. Right? And there's other things we need to look at when we start looking at discharging water all over town is what's the potential impact on the wetlands. You start putting 1-2 million gallons of water a day into a location, and are you going to be flooding out wetlands? Are you going to be flooding people's basements? These are things we don't want to do, so this is what these meetings are, is to talk over, to look at the model and figure out what the potential impacts are to residential properties, to wetlands, and see what we can do to alleviate that. In addition to the section that we put together to assist, we pulled people in from our wetlands program and our water supply program to help in these discussions on what we're going to do with all this treated groundwater. So, keeping with the theme of the day, there's a little collaboration going on between DEP and the municipalities and their engineering staff. And I think Jason mentioned it too. Let's throw PFAS into the mix. What do we do with that? If we're collecting sewage all over the place and discharging it, we have to think about what we're doing with PFAS. So it's a very complex situation, a lot of work on our part, working with the towns, but I think it's going fairly well. So to date, this is the status of where we are with watershed permits. Pleasant Bay watershed permit was actually issued in 2018 before we even had the regulation. It was recognized that something needed to be done down there fairly quickly. And so it was kind of good to work with these folks and see how the whole process works while we were putting together the regulations to apply to everyone else. The town of Barnstable applied for a watershed permit in September. For all the watersheds in town, we're still in the process of reviewing that. It's the first one. It's going to take us some time to go through it and figure out how we move forward with that. 9 other towns submitted 29 notices of intent for 27 watersheds. So the towns are heading in the right direction. They're recognizing that the best way to handle this is with a watershed permit so that we can address the problem holistically. One town submitted 2 de minimis load applications that we're currently reviewing. And the watershed permits, NOIs that we've received to date cover all but 2 watersheds on the Cape. So a really good response to the new regulations to address this issue and allow us to move forward. And I mentioned earlier on the BANRT, the wastewater, the septic systems, the innovative septic systems, and I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague from the Boston office, Lealdon, to talk a little bit more about that. Thanks, Gerard.
Good morning. First, wanted to just say a big thank you to Webner. I've collaborated as a member of the department with Webner for more than 30 years, and I really appreciate the sponsorship of this conference today and getting all these people together to talk about these important issues. When I am having this conversation at DEP and elsewhere, I often pause the conversation to say, this is the largest water quality improvement project in the Commonwealth. And to put that in perspective, last week we were meeting on 269 towns in the Commonwealth that are affected by pathogen-impaired waters. But this project, taking all the science over the last 3 decades, 2 to 3 decades, and actually doing something about it, and all the people in this room being a part of implementation of the largest water quality improvement project in the Commonwealth. So I wanted to talk about a couple of items this morning. First, the best available nitrogen-reducing technology. Last Friday, the department designated those best available nitrogen-reducing technologies. This is an important step forward because with the new construction deadline coming up of July 8th, we need to have this finding and designation in place in order for people who are purchasing and installing these systems and designing them to be able to know what systems that they need to be using. So just as a review, the definition that we adopted in Title V last year says that a system which has a total nitrogen effluent performance value of 10 milligrams per liter or less and is certified by the Department for general use, or if no such alternative systems meeting 10 milligrams per liter or less has received general use, then an alternative system with the lowest total nitrogen effluent performance value certified by the Department for general use. And we created an opportunity, optionally, for systems that are in the provisional and piloting phases of their innovative alternative technology approvals to be able to be used in addition to those general use systems that we've designated. So it's an alternative system granted provisional or piloting use by the department, provided that the alternative system has a total nitrogen performance value less than or equal to 10 milligrams per liter or less, and if no systems with a total nitrogen performance value less than or equal to 10 milligrams per liter has received general use approval, then a system with a total nitrogen effluent performance value less than or equal to the lowest alternative system certified by the Department for general use. Boy, that's a mouthful. So putting that into practice, as I mentioned, these new requirements for new construction start in just a few days, in a couple of weeks, July 8th. And these are the systems. This slide down out of order, so I'm going to advance to the general use technologies first, and we'll go back. These are 2 systems that were designated in the general use technologies category. I would encourage you all, as you're selecting them or identifying how to advise about them, that you pay careful attention to the details of these approvals. They're complex. As you can see, there's different sort of categories. Some of the technology proponents have more than one system that have some type of approval, so it's important that you identify the correct ones. Here we have Septitech's STAR technology that is approved for residential use in flows of less than 2,000 gallons per day, and also the Aranco system, Advantex treatment system, approved for residential use less than 2,000 gallons per day. So I encourage you to become familiar with the specifics of these proposals in order to select the correct ones. Now going back to this slide with the provisional use technologies that were designated, you can see that we have 5 on this slide. The first one designated for residential use, less than 2,000 gallons per day, is Nitrex. Then we have a nitro system designated for both residential and non-residential use, less than 2,000 gallons per day. And then Nitrex, BioClear, and Septitech, which are larger systems, those in the 2,000 to 10,000 gallon per day categories that are designated for both residential and non-residential use. So these are the provisional use technologies that have been designated. We have updated our website. We're obligated to maintain and publish this list, and we are using data to determine these designations that is housed at the MassDEP Septic Test Center, and also data that has been submitted to us by the companies. We've done a performance evaluation. That's how these designations came about. We adopted a 90% criterion for the systems had to be meeting, the 90% of the systems that were installed that we were reviewing data on had to be performing at or better than the values that are established in their approvals. So that's how we determine those that are designated as best available nitrogen-reducing technologies. And we will continue to receive data, more systems that are installed, more systems for which we receive data. We will continue to do those performance evaluations from time to time. And we're working closely with the companies, the technology proponents, so that we can hopefully the performance of some of those systems that did not get designated at the current time can be listed at a later point in time. This is extremely important for expanding the market, expanding the possibility, trying to avoid restrictions on availability of systems that could help slow down installations and cause slowdowns in correcting this problem. So we want to continue to closely work with these municipalities and technology proponents to get the right systems in place and additional systems added to these lists of BANRT. And then we have two piloting technologies that have been designated. One piloting technology designated biobarrier is designated for residential and non-residential use in that 2,000 to 10,000 gallon per day category. There's a lot of information here, very hard to absorb just from these charts and slides. I would encourage you to go to our website. You can study this in more detail. Take your time. We have, as I said, mentioned, sent out a communication last week to the municipal officials and the organizations with whom we've worked closely to give them notice of this information as well. So I will likely be available and disseminated throughout, town halls and elsewhere. And then moving on, one of the other very important parts that we heard when we were on the public hearing circuit as we were trying to promulgate these regulations, we heard a lot from both individuals and municipalities and others about the importance of funding opportunities. And you heard Andrew and Aaron speak to the need for funding earlier today. And so I want to say that the funding opportunities are increasing, and we're working hard to try to get those funds disseminated where we are administering grant programs. And we established through the help of the legislature and the help of the Healy-Driscoll administration, we were able to implement natural resource nitrogen sensitive area grants last year. We awarded $300,000 in grants to 5 communities. We expect to receive funding for this program to continue this year from 2 different sources. One is a capital source. In a few weeks, when the budget for state fiscal year 2025 is settled, we will know exactly how much money we will have for this purpose. We do expect it to be about $600,000 in grants for the NRNSA grants this coming year, as well as an additional Clean Water Trust source of grants that should be for at least $400,000. So significant increases in available funding. I think it was Jason who also mentioned the SNEP grant. That's another source of funding. One that I didn't list specifically here, but that's available through the state revolving fund, is the Community Septic Management Program. And so that is implemented through municipalities, but they can make funds available to individuals to upgrade septic systems. And the opportunity to use that funding was enhanced this year so that it would address not only failing septic systems, but those that are being used to address this nitrogen problem on the Cape. So that was an important change that happened at the legislative level. Additional grants, the programs that I administer through the Watershed Planning Program that does monitoring and assessment and TMDLs also administers these grants. We have 2 sources of funding, the 319 non-point source grants, and 604B water quality management planning grants. You're going to hear more about these two grants in detail later this afternoon when Dr. Padmini Das, who's the non-point source section leader for the program, will be speaking. The demand or requests for these funds is extremely large. We had 30 proposals requesting funding of $8.3 million in project proposals, but there's only $3.1 million in funding available. The 319 non-point source grants, for those of you who may not be familiar, are implementation grants. So many of the municipalities and others who have designed systems, designed mechanisms to actually start reducing the nitrogen loads can hopefully acquire grant money to be able to help put those implementation, to implement those projects and put them in place. The 604B Water Quality Management Planning Grant received 14 proposals seeking $2.3 million in grants with just under $1 million of available funds. These sources are for planning purposes, so activities that relate to, how you're going to design your nitrogen reduction efforts in your town can utilize 604B funding to put that type of to fund that type of planning opportunity. One thing of note, the 319 and 604B grants are federal funds. In order to receive federal funds, MassDEP has to meet a number of criteria that are established by the federal government. In order to do that, we have to submit a work plan to the federal government to tell them how we're going to manage and implement this program, and they have to approve it. So one of the important things that we have done in the last year is to revise the work plan that we had submitted to be specific to the nitrogen reduction on the Cape. And we got approval from EPA to incorporate elements of these nitrogen reduction efforts into our 319 and 604B grant programs. This enabled us to, kind of bring this amount of funding to bear in addition to the other grants that I mentioned a moment ago. However, in order to receive that and spend those funds in compliance with federal requirements, they have to have a 9-element watershed-based plan to receive those 319 funds. Now, many of the municipalities have already constructed, their comprehensive water management plans or their targeted water management plans, and those are part of the watershed permit applications that Gerard was talking about a moment ago, and we believe that those CWMPs and TWMPs likely can be enhanced a bit to make sure that they include these 9-element plans that EPA requires. So with some modification or improvement to the CWMPs, TWMPs that many of you already have in place, it would be possible to make them available for this source of 319 funding. So wanted to call out just some of the folks that you can contact. There's my name and contact information, email address. One of the important other parts of this is that there has been, in addition to the nitrogen sensitive area grants that I mentioned, we had other grants that were funded by the legislature, and DEP's sort of grant portfolio has been increasing significantly. So we were able to hire Courtney Starling, who is helping with the implementation of our grant programs. We're hoping to make those both more accessible and more efficient. We'll be hearing more about our grants in the near future through Courtney and others, as well as Padmini Das, who, as I mentioned, is part of the 604B and 319 grant program implementation team. And then finally, this slide represents staff in Gerard's region, Southeast Regional Office, with Gerard's information at the top. Some of the important players here on this slide: Aaron, Ian, and Samantha, as well as Sean, and Andrew, known as Drew, and Maggie are Their contact information is there. These are the folks who are putting the works, into effect at the watershed permit level, reviewing plans, communicating with the municipalities and others, and trying to get these plans all underway, as well as the team from the Boston office, myself, Mary Beth Chubb, Caroline Adamson, who is extremely instrumental in getting the performance evaluation criteria done for BANRT designations, and as well as some of the members of our wetlands folks who Gerard mentioned as well. I think that's our last slide. This place might look familiar to you. And I don't know if we're at time or if we have any other questions or whatever.
I guess this is a question for Gerard. How did your team arrive at the 3% contributions for the de minimis exceptions? Why 3%? Why not 5 or 10?
It does seem so long ago. It's stumper.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I can't say right now.
Yeah, I need to go back and take a look at that. I know we were considering 5% and settled on 3%, but I don't remember all the specifics of how it came out with that percentage.
Do you anticipate that there'll be additional TMDL set for the north side of the Cape and South Shore areas? And if so, what the timing of those will be?
So I think that there are elements in Truro where there may be an additional TMDL in the Pamet River system. There is some complexities with the Nauset system because of the changes in the hydrology when the barrier beach breaches from time to time that has made it difficult to establish that TMDL. I don't have anything specific on the north side of the Cape. We have several in the Buzzards Bay area. We're working with those communities, hoping to work with those communities in the planning phase in the coming months. So one other one, I think. Oh, and I just wanted to mention that Wellfleet was designated after the regulations were promulgated, so that TMDL went into effect after the original date that the first ones were designated on Cape Cod.